Welcome to Contemporary Issues class. Nice to have you all here today. And I'm Steve, the leader of the class. This is Ron, our presenter today. And we're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson, his life and faith. He's got a great story, and Ron's going to let us know a lot about that. So we'll look at his life and his writings about faith. So with that, I want to welcome newcomers. Any first-time folks who are here? Welcome folks in the back. Just want to
let's hear names again. Let's hear names from our visitors again.
So we just ask your names.
Oh, I'm Michael. My name.
Sarah.
Michael and Sarah. Great, Sarah.
Melanie.
Melanie. Thanks. Welcome, and want to welcome Jerry and Sandra back. And thanks for being with us again too. If you don't know about our class, it's called Contemporary Issues, and we talk about current things in the news and historical figures and things from a Christian perspective. So welcome. I know I sound a little stopped up today. I was getting at the tail end of a cold. I'm not contagious anymore, but I do sound a little stopped up in my nose. Hi, Gail. Nice to have you here. Our usual announcements, Zoomers, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not talking, and we are recording this for future playback for folks who are not able to be here and enjoy watching online later on. And with that, any other announcements? What did folks do for the big serve event yesterday?
Thanks for asking.
Where did Dee, where were you?
Let's go to the second Chance Center, formerly incarcerated people that got closed yesterday because we didn't have enough volunteers. So we ended up going over to IFCS, which is the food bank in Inglewood. Ended up doing some work around the perimeter, around the grounds, doing some cleaning up, chopping down trees that were in the way of traffic, making the facility a little more presentable for visitors that need to use that facility. It was hard work, good hot work. Had probably 6 people that showed up for that. It's a good experience.
Great.
Then we went and drank beer after.
There you go. You earned it. Yeah, that's good. And
I was at the Women's Crisis Center, which is actually a male-female kind of a thing. But what impressed me about it was the county has great facilities if there's a crisis. I don't know if you're aware of it, but the #1 crime in Douglas County is domestic abuse. And it kind of shocked me when I heard that also, you know, in terms of that. But this facility is for people that are especially in imminent danger of an abusive spouse. And that abuse does not have to be physical. It's a lot of abuse is mental in terms of that. But anyway, if you ever needed that, there's and I should have brought the number with me, a 24-hour hotline that does that. But to show you how confidential that is, we could not take a picture in front of anything that showed the background. You can't even Google the address.
Right. Wow.
It's that good. I mean, and it's a beautiful facility for people that are going through that. So I guess I'm saying that if you know of somebody who is in that sort of a situation and they need a safe house, that, you know, there's a 24-hour hotline in the crisis center that you can do for that.
Very good. Okay.
I took our 12-year-old granddaughter down to the Denver Rescue Mission, and we prepped and served the meal to 385 men that came through there last night. So, and I just think that's so good for young people that are privileged to get a chance to see that not everybody has a place to call home and a meal every night, you know. So, but that's quite a setup down there. They really, and they serve really good meals.
Where was that, Vicki? Where was that?
It was down on near Larimer, kind of down there. It's the Denver Rescue Mission. Isn't that what it is? Yeah. Yeah. So and there were mostly it's all men. Is that the way it can? Anybody can go.
No, anybody can go.
Yeah, that's right. But it was all men. I didn't see.
Is it a building or a tent?
No, it's a building. It's a building, and it's been there for a long time.
There is a separate women's shelter.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, but women can go to visit. They
Yeah, but I
For a
didn't.
meal.
And there were all sorts of refugees. About 24 refugees they served last.
I think it's the 23rd. 23rd, and I think Arapahoe or Lawrence.
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 It's Lawrence, yeah.
And that's a place you can go and serve all year round.
Right.
We've done it all different times of the year. Yeah, Joy.
There were 22 of us packing beans for soup,
Great,
all ages.
great, good.
I
Karen.
did Holy Kicks, which is a thing for school children that are under poverty, and they're all on Polychlora, a lot of them are immigrants. And this guy collects all these brand new shoes. And then he puts them in bins, and then he brings the kids in and they try on their shoes, they get a new pair of socks, they get a new pair of shoes. And it was just so much fun to watch the joy in some of them, especially the little kids with the sparklers.
Yeah.
Went all the way up to high school. He says he has men's events too, so I don't know where he goes, but he's over in Aurora by the time. Really.
So many great projects. Okay, let's take, last one. Go ahead.
I tried quilt, always did too, and brought 3 granddaughters, and they had
Great.
a great time. They go down to Children's Hospital in Joshua Station.
Thank you, Shar.
Yeah, and now
Mary.
Decorated
Yeah.
bags for Project Angel Heart.
Uh-huh.
We had some young kids, some young girls join us, which was fun
Great,
for all of us to be creative.
great. Well, maybe all these things will encourage us to do more things during the year too. I know that's one of the reasons we do the big service, to give us a boost to think about it all during the year. Before we start, a couple of you wanted to talk for just a minute about the coronation yesterday. What did you think of the coronation and all of the pomp and circumstance and the king vowing to preserve and maintain the church? That was part of his
Particular head.
yes.
The best thing he said.
I thought he said churches. Didn't he say churches?
I thought it meant the
Faith.
church of England.
Yeah.
The best thing he said was, I come here to serve,
that was
not
a
be served.
big.
That was
Yeah, he was.
the best.
And yet he was.
And yet he was.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Eric, what did you say?
The best thing he said was, I came here to serve, not be served.
Oh, good.
And yet he was being served anyway.
Yeah.
I think I heard that or read that somewhere.
Yeah.
Jesus said
There was one story I saw in the media that said it was interesting that it's still a religious coronation ceremony in a country where religion is declining rapidly, and in Europe overall. And so how would the royal family address that? Is it even part of their role to address that? So just something to look at as they modernize the royal family. Will they also speak about the church, because he's the preserver and protector of the church?
Did you notice that when he got the special anointing, they walled it off? They brought in portable barriers so people couldn't see it.
Is that right?
I don't know why though.
That's always been the tradition.
Oh,
I don't think.
tradition, there you go.
They spent a lot of money.
There's been a lot of,
$1 billion.
How much?
125 billion.
Yeah.
but the royal family
Paid part of it.
paid part of it, and the tourism from the royal family interest brings in many times more than they spend, they have said allegedly. So that's part of the appeal of the royal family. I know we're gonna wrap up. Sharon.
I like where he went to the other religions at the end of the coronation.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a worldwide, because they love worldwide. I mean, they've been around for all over.
He paused in front of it.
Yeah, they are.
Interesting.
Acknowledging others, really.
Who got up at 5 o'clock?
Oh, I was up at 3.
3 to watch?
You're a monarchist.
Are you
But you know, that's about what time I usually look at.
Oh, okay, so maybe that's
That's a good idea.
It was on PBS yesterday afternoon
good.
at a more reasonable time.
And did Harry make up with his dad and his brother? No,
He was in the third.
the third row, okay.
He didn't seem too upset.
The ongoing saga. Yes.
The
Okay,
thing I read is that they put somebody in front of him, a lady in front of him that had a great big hat with feathers.
oh, no.
So that the cameras couldn't even see him.
Oh, he was on. I saw him.
Well,
By design.
it's an ongoing,
And Harry was there in the third row.
alrighty. Speaking of royalty, Thomas Jefferson could be considered one of our royal Americans. And I want to give a little plug before he starts to the PBS special that's still running called Thomas Jefferson's Secret Bible. And so just go on your PBS station and watch. Very interesting about how Jefferson, as many of us know, wrote his own Bible by cutting out all of the supernatural miracles and the resurrection and pasting together his own Bible of just Jesus, called Jesus, Life and Morals. And he was obviously an admirer of Jesus, but did not believe in the supernatural parts of the Bible. And
You should have heard today's sermon. Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mark,
Like
so-
the whale.
And I'll just finish real quick. And the TV series, the documentary shows the Bible, Jefferson's Bible. He's in the Smithsonian, but it's being repaired. It has really crinkled paper because it's 200 years old, and they're trying to put chemicals on the paper to enable it to be shown publicly again. Otherwise, it's going to just crumble into nothing. And so, but it's very interesting. And so they put on their plastic gloves, the restorers, and say, I feel like this is the Bible itself, you know.
It's original.
An original, yes. And they're showing it. And interesting, you can see where he actually pasted parts onto these pages, and then it was bound together by a book producer.
Did he cut and paste the King James version?
He had 5 versions that he used, including King James. So he had these all in his library and out and put them all together. Fascinating. So take a look at that if you have time.
With that, this is Jim and Jane Watson's copy of the Jefferson Bible. It's an interlinear in a couple different languages. I think it's Greek, French, and English. I'll pass that around. Please return it since we need to return it to the Watsons. Also, to some degree, this lesson was thought of when we were doing the one on Abe Lincoln, President's Day. John Meacham, of course, wrote not only a biography of Lincoln, which there are hundreds, he also wrote one on Jefferson. And largely, the material we talk about today is drawn out of John Meacham's. This may have been the book, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. This may have been the book of winning the Pulitzer Prize. Maybe, maybe not. But at any rate, he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. Meacham does, I think, a really good job with his biographies of American figures. So we'll pass that around. A lot of nice pictures in that. Okay, let's get started here. There's dozens, maybe hundreds of books on Jefferson. He's one of the most written about presidents, one of the most famous presidents. He's on what coin?
Nickel.
The nickel, yeah. As his house is on the back of the nickel, Monticello. Some other books on Jefferson. Recently, they looked at the children that Thomas Jefferson reportedly fathered through his slave, Sally Hemings. And they kind of thought maybe that wasn't true. They were hoping it wasn't true. But in the mid-2000s, 2010, 2008, many of the Black Jefferson descendants did some DNA testing, and they proved quite conclusively, yea, verily, Thomas Jefferson did father probably as many as 5 children through his slave servant girl, Sally Hemings, who he took to Europe with her. And that's a book written by one of the Jefferson descendants on that book. Also, while he was president, Thomas Jefferson also took bold foreign relations steps and sent the U.S. Navy and Marines to go get the Barbary pirates. When we sing the Marine hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, that refers to that. And that's a pretty good book on that war with the Barbary pirates. So let's get into the goodies on Jefferson. Again, he's on the nickel. There's some different versions of the nickel. Quick summary of some of his key things. He boldly stepped out to side with the Patriots to support independence. He put his life at risk right away before the Declaration of Independence was even formulated by him mostly. He risked his life, his liberty, his pursuit of happiness by
Going that way.
stepping out to lead the way, to lead a rebellion against Great Britain. He provided much of the brain power to guide the colonies to independence. The one thing we see about Jefferson is that he was one very smart, intelligent guy. He was arguably the most foremost champion of progressive democratic principles. He authored the Declaration of Independence. He was on a committee of three with Ben Franklin, I think John Adams, and himself, and they were told to go off and write a draft. And they all three started on drafts. They met their first day in their three-man committee meeting. And Jefferson presented first. He says, here's what I've come up with. And the other two guys were, Franklin and Adams, were blown away. Said, forget or even showing what we did. Really, you've got it, man. You've hit the number here. You've got a, Grammy Award winner with this document of yours. And they worked right from his. And he is considered the author, certainly the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. In the early 1800s, there was quite a bit of buyer's remorse by some of the early people in the country in the late 1700s, early 1800s, thinking maybe we shouldn't have a president. Maybe we should go back to a nice, clean monarchy where you put George Washington or somebody else on the throne. And Jefferson fought very hard to stop this go back to monarchy movement from gaining more strength. Had he not stepped up aggressively to defend the principles of democracy while he was president, there's a possibility we could have slid back into a monarchy. He was very open-minded. I love that trait in a person. Open-minded to science, learning, discussion, compromise. He did own slaves, but he was ahead of his time, and we'll talk about that on his treatment of slaves. And of course, he founded the University of Virginia before he passed away. If there was ever a contrast to Lincoln, for those of you that heard the lesson on Lincoln literally had about a year and a half of formal education and literally came out of the log cabin deprived background and became a very self-educated man. Total opposite to Jefferson. If there was ever a few of the presidents that came out of a rich heritage of wealth, privilege, and intellectual stimulation, it was Jefferson. His family immigrated to Virginia in 1612. There was a Jefferson among the delegates at Jamestown. His great-grandfather was a planter, speculated in land at Yorktown, and left a state of land, slaves, furniture, livestock. We step up another generation to his grandfather. His grandfather owned a racehorse and was sheriff and justice of the peace in a Virginia county, as well as the captain of militia. And then his father, Peter Jefferson, was somewhat of a surveyor and helped draw the boundary line between Virginia and North Carolina. And his father, Peter, was also a colonel in the Virginia militia and a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses, which is like the Virginia Senate. Peter Jefferson, that's his dad, of course, married well. He married a lady whose father was a sea captain and a planter. And the Randolph family, which was Thomas Jefferson's mom's family, is extremely prevalent in early American politics. You'll see the Randolphs showing up in many places. And it was one of the foremost families in Virginia, and they held a lot of high positions. So he married well. So he's got this incredibly rich heritage, rich not only in money, but in talented, trained, educated, prominent people. Next. There's his mom, Jane Randolph. Jane ran the, no, I'm sorry, that's his mother. Jane ran the Shadwell property that had 66 slaves and almost 3,000 acres, which included the Monticello tract. Monticello is cello, I keep trying to call it something else, was part of the larger Jefferson ownings. Peter, his dad, Thomas's father, died in 1757. Thomas Jefferson's dad was 49 when he died, and young Thomas Jefferson was only 14. So he was a young teenager when his dad died. He had a disabled sister, Elizabeth, and he was one of 8 children, and he was the eldest. So he was the eldest son of 8 children. There's a picture of his mother's grave there. I believe at Monticello, there in that rear graveyard. How many here have been to Monticello? I'm just curious. Quite a few. Okay. Next one. Okay. So he was a very privileged tutored youth. At age 9, he was sent like to a little, almost one-on-one boarding school with the Reverend William Douglas, rector of St. James Parish. Spent 5 years with him, except for the summers. He would come home for the summer, but he kind of got raised almost by these reverends, these tutors. His father died when he was 14, but the family money and property was sufficient to keep things going. He didn't come anywhere close to falling into poverty. Thomas later boarded with the Reverend James Maury, and there's a picture of Maury off there, who taught him literature, history, philosophy, Greek, Latin. Also took him on hikes and hunts. So he was like a father, really, when you get down to it. Maury. There's a historical marker in Virginia talking about Maury's chapel. Thomas was closest to his eldest sister, who was the next sibling in line, and had a pretty good relationship. And he had a pretty good relationship with all his siblings. At age 17, he left to attend William and Mary College, which is a pretty young age to go off to college. And then when he graduated from William and Mary, he went on to do a 5-year kind of co-op study thing to become a lawyer. His first wild falling in love, at age 19, he fell madly in love with a lady, Rebecca Burwell, but the romance went nowhere. Another guy beat him out for his first true love. He did mention in one of his writings, he said, many and great are the comforts of the single state. And historians have read this, and they've kind of implied that he may have indulged in some sexual escapades with, some obvious opportunities that came up when he was single. So he wasn't a sexual Puritan completely. Okay, again, but apparently had tremendously high finest school in manners and morals in America. So it was not like the movie Animal House. But it was really a top-notch place for people that were dedicated to high morals, high intellectual achievement, not the Animal House. Jefferson was extremely self-disciplined. So he's not a spoiled kid. He's got tremendous focus. Studied about 15 hours each day at college. How many can say that? And declared not less than 2 hours a day should be devoted to exercise. So he learned the violin, and he was very open-minded. Throughout his life, he not only sought out vaccinations against like smallpox, but he insisted that all his slaves and a family that he could influence would take vaccinations. So that was a progressive kind of mind. It shows his attitude. A lawyer, George Weath, tutored him for 5 years after he graduated from college and gave him his law background. And Weath was considered an incredibly honest, steadfast guy. I mean, he was not one to lead Jefferson astray. He was really, you're gonna be a lawyer, not a shyster lawyer. Wythe and Jefferson was loved, admired, and appreciated by friends, clients, and elders. And Jefferson became a very bright, enthusiastic, and well-liked lawyer. Next one. Also, William and Mary, that one. Jefferson was definitely exposed to progressive thinking, enlightenment thinking, whatever you want to call it. This is one of the guys who was one of the primary professors, teachers of Jefferson. He was a Scotsman named William Small, and he was conversant on Bacon, Locke, Newton, Smith, and philosophers of the Scottish Enlightenment. So he definitely played a major part in giving Thomas Jefferson I call it, enlightenment, progressive, open-minded attitude toward life and learning. In fact, they said Jefferson said sometimes instead of asking what would Jesus do, he asked himself, what would Small, Wythe, and Randolph do in this situation? Three people that were prominent teachers. So next one. Okay. There was a 7-year war that raged between the British and the French Indian Alliance from 1752 to 1759. Britain, of course, felt that the colonies should pick up more of the expense of that war. 1764, the British House of Commons put in the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Cinnamon Act. No, that wasn't one of them. But Jefferson's lawyer tutor, George Wythe, drafted a petition protesting the British taxes. So we're starting to see in the 1760s the format of the American independence movement, discontent with the British and their heavy-handed control. Patrick Henry, of course, boldly protested the British taxation, and the Virginia General Assembly voted 20-19 that the colonies alone should have the right to determine taxation, showing that it was close. It didn't. It wasn't a unanimity of the agreement. Next one. Okay. Jefferson must have read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence. He must have gone forward in a time machine, because they say he really, really applied all the principles that are shown in this book. He said he offered an attentive audience to people, sincerely listened to them. He was a poor public speaker, but he excelled at writing. Nobody could outwrite him hardly. He wrote with clarity, depth, and speed. He could sit down in one evening and put together a document that just blew you away in terms of its clarity, its intellect, its depth. So he's one heck of a writer. He knew how to flatter, phrase carefully, promote discussion, and avoid confrontation. So he was a master at not picking people off. He knew how to very politely talk, compromise.
We could use that today.
We sure could. He turned to subjects familiar with those who he conversed. He listened to other people. Intelligent, open-minded, thirsted for knowledge, very sociable at all levels. Popular guy. Temptations and trials. At age 25, he did fall in love with his friend John Walker's wife. Whoops, not supposed to do that. But was unsuccessful seducing her. Some other things. In 1767, he began building a new home at Monticello, Italian for Little Mountain. And in 1768, he was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses. And then on New Year's Day in 1772, this is 4 years before the Declaration of Independence, he's 28, and he marries a 23-year-old widow who's got a good bit of money. but it was a good marriage. They loved each other. He wasn't marrying her for her money. Next one. So here's his wife, the love of his life. Even though her name is Martha Wales Skelton, not related to Red Skelton. But Martha's nickname was Patty. She was born on a plantation called Forest. She's 5.5 years younger than him, and she was widowed before marrying Thomas at age 23. She would pass away just 11 years later after Jefferson married her, but not before bearing 6 children. Okay. His mom had his grandmother died in childbirth, giving birth to his wife. Martha grew up under the guidance of 2 stepmothers. That's his wife. And so his wife wasn't treated terribly well by the stepmothers. So when Patty was on her deathbed, she made Thomas Jefferson promise that he wouldn't remarry again. And perhaps it was because she didn't want the children to get a stepmom and possibly get ignored or mistreated by a stepmom.
So
But
she had died before he became president.
Let's see. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
So did he ever remarry?
Well, next one gets into that.
Not legally.
Now,
Oh,
his wife's father had some Hemmings slaves. And I make sure I get this right. So his wife's father fathered a gal and took her as his concubine. And Jefferson married a relative of his father-in-law. So it's all in the family. It's a real National Enquirer thing. Okay. In the Jefferson family tree, we see the 6 children of Tom and Martha, Patty, and we see that only one of them lived to adulthood. 4 of the 6 died within a year of birth. One of them made it to about age 6. Only one survived. Interestingly enough, though, with the slave gal, he fathered several more children. We'll talk about that in a moment. Jump to the next one. Slavery, he inherited about 150 slaves from his father. And generally, he averaged about 200 slaves at any one time. He did craft a bill that would give individual slave owners the right to flee their slaves. And he did introduce some legislation to try to sort of phase out slavery, impede it, break its stranglehold. And he was very discouraged that he was not able to get anywhere with this legislation.
Well, he still held his own slaves.
Yeah. He decided it would take many generations for change. On the plus side, the record seems to be that he treated his slaves extremely well. Okay. But still, he's a slaveholder. Okay. Quick note on the slave economy. The slave economy was the great wealth of the South. They say the economic value of slaves prior to the Civil War was more than the value of all the railroads, factories, and banks combined. Had the Confederacy been a separate nation, it would have ranked 4th richest in the world at the start of the Civil War, with 75% of its income, I think, coming from cotton. So slavery was the economic foundation of the South, no doubt about it. Okay, we quickly move towards the Revolution. He was governor of Virginia during part of the Revolutionary War. The British invaded Virginia during the 4th year of the Revolution, and Jefferson was highly criticized for his ineptness and slowness of response to develop an effective and broad response militarily to the British invasion. But to his credit, I don't think there was hardly anybody else that was very good at military matters. He didn't claim to be a general. Next one. Okay. The British wanted to get him at all costs. They sent a large contingent of cavalry, like 40 or 50 cavalrymen, to make a dash across Virginia to raid Monticello, try to nab him. They were not only going to nab him, but arrest the entire Virginia House of Burgesses and Assembly meeting there in Chancellorsville.
Was that Tarleton?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. A person that needs to be honored in American history, Jack Jouett, a 26-year-old captain of the Virginia militia, observed the cavalry group, and he figured they're not going to a drive-in movie. He spotted them about 40 miles away and figured out what they were up to. And so he embarked on an overnight 40-mile mad ride through the backwoods on a horse. This is the Jack Jouett, to warn the Virginia delegation to get out of there. And also he got to Monticello and told Jefferson, you better get out of here right now. Jefferson got his family out, came back to get some books and stuff, and missed being captured by minutes. If he had fooled around with his Jefferson, well, he hadn't written it yet, his library, another 10 minutes, they would have nailed it. And that might have been the end of Thomas Jefferson. Interestingly enough, they also, the British did succeed in capturing 7 members of the Virginia Assembly, including a certain Daniel Boone, the Daniel Boone. But they weren't too interested in him. He wasn't very prominent at that time. They let him give an apology and released him. They didn't put him in jail. But Boone got nabbed by those dragoons, one of the few. Okay, we didn't mention the amalgamation of races. There's a book, The Hemmingses of Monticello, and Gail's book is a very excellent one. Next one. Here's Sally Hemings. She was, it was said that she was very attractive, and they reconstructed this picture from a portrait I think they have of a couple relatives whom were said to have looked very much like her. She was a very attractive young lady. She, of course, had the white blood of Thomas Jefferson's wife's father in her. Okay. So he took Sally Hemings as his concubine and had her by his side for 37 years. Fathered at least 5 children with her, most who looked strikingly like him. It was well known in the communion. Where do these redheaded mulatto kids that look like Jefferson, where'd they come from? Well, everybody kind of knew. He took Sally and her brother to France with him for several years. And when he got ready to return from France, Sally could have said, I'm not going back. You know, I can stay here and forget this slavery stuff. But he treated her very well, certainly in the bedroom. But he apparently told her, you know, come on back, you'll be my slave, but you know, things will be well. You won't be like a classical slave. She agreed to return, and she was given many privileges and freedoms when she came back to Monticello. The birth dates of Sally's children all aligned with Thomas's presence at Monticello, and the DNA evidence that they finally nailed down in about 2005-ish proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Many of the Jeffersonian historians didn't want to find this out about Jefferson. They wanted to believe that he was completely as pure as ivory soap, and you know, no, but the evidence is there, and the DNA is conclusive. He also, Tabloid Tom, he did get involved with a married and young, attractive French lady, Maria Causeway, when he was over there. So he not only knew how to influence friends and influence people, but he knew how to,
Okay.
appeal to the opposite sex. Okay. Okay, how are we doing on time?
We're just about done with slides.
Yeah, we better move it on. Okay. So he moved up politically, served as George Washington's Secretary of State, great position. Became vice president in 1797. There was a a tripartite election with Adams, Jefferson, and Pinckney in there. And the vote in the electoral college, he came in second. Adams won with 71 votes. He was second with 68 votes. Pinckney was not far behind at 59 votes. And the legislatures chose the electors in 11 of 16 states. In 1800, the presidential election ended in a tie. It was thrown to the House. Jefferson won it on the 36th ballot. He won that first term by the skin of his teeth, so to speak. He got rid of Adams' Alien Sedition Act, the eased naturalization rules, and he handled the Aaron Burr situation very well. Burr, if anybody, should have been, he was treasonous to the United States. He tried to form almost his own country, Blenderhassett Island. And of course, Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton dead in a duel in July of 1804.
New Jersey.
And then, of course, one of his best acts, Jefferson, he ordered the demolition of the privy on the White House lawn, an installation of water closets in the White House. Okay, next one. Okay, his moral undergirdings. He was not a Christian. He was uncomfortable with Orthodox religion. He embraced enlightenment as expressed by John Locke. He embraced the Lockean views. He combated religious control in government, aggressively fought for church-state separation. And his individual liberty views made him a champion for democracy, shunning the British rule. And he did a real good job of fending off efforts to return to a monarchy. He also, while in France, collected some many paintings of religious character. A couple of those that are shown there. His comments to his nephew, Peter Carr. He said, religion required careful thought, not reflective acceptance. He said, fix reason firmly in her seat, call to her tribunal every fact, every opinion, question with boldness even the existence of God. Because if there is one, he must approve the homage of reason, that of blindfolded fear. He said, were I to be founded of a religious sect, I would call them the Apiarians, after the example of the bee, extracting honey of every sect. So like the bees go around and get the sweet nectar of the best flowers. He said, that's what I would have done or do with religion. I pick the honey, pick the best pieces off of the ones that are there. Next one. Okay, short statement of beliefs. He believed in only one God. He's perfect. Felt there was a future state of rewards and punishments. But he said he put his religion into really love God with all thy heart and thy neighbor as thyself, and then pretty much stick with that. Next one. So we'll stop here, but let's discuss some of his thoughts of faith and God, and look at some. He felt there was one God and oneness or unity of God. He felt the life and teachings of Jesus constituted the exemplar model for living. He believed reason, rational thought, science, and philosophy coexist with faith in God. So he felt you could work all this stuff together. He believed humans had the ability for free will. Also on the Jefferson Bible, where he cut it up, and he definitely felt that the Bible was very imperfect, needed polish and abridgment and change. And I want to mention this is one of the great courses, a book from one of the great courses by Bart Ehrman, Jesus Interrupted. But there's incredibly strong evidence, in fact, almost overpowering evidence, that many of the books of the Bible are not authored by who they claim to be, inconsistent. Some of them appear to be forgeries. And for those who criticize Jefferson for cutting up the Bible, you can say, well, when you read the Bible, you're really cutting it up with your mind and selecting, and you're cherry picking it anyway. If you really think about it, you don't just say, yeah, every sentence exactly as it stands. You're already cutting up the Bible in your mind. You're cherry picking, you're reasoning, you're weighing and balancing. So in a way, he just did on paper what all of us do to some degree with the Bible. So I've yacked enough. Let's get some good round discussion going on. If we could put up that last slide again.
Sorry.
Of the Jeffersonian thoughts. Yeah. He said no religion could claim absolute monopoly on the Holy Spirit or theological truth. He thought that the authors of the Bible were inspired by God, but they were humans and subject to human error. So Jefferson was a very pick, choose, and build your faith according to ration, reason, and thought.
The documentary, excuse me, I watched said that Jefferson believed that Jesus lived a horrific life, human life, and then the miracles were added by the early church in the years after Jesus died. That was his belief. So, or whatever that's.
Right. Didn't he and Adams both die on the 4th of July?
Yeah,
Didn't
50
Adams
years.
make the statement he still has he's dying, but Jefferson still lives? Something, I mean, my understanding was they didn't like.
They mentioned yeah, but they did reconcile a good decade before they passed away and exchanged, I think, more than 50 or 100 letters.
And how old was he when he passed away? Do you know?
He made it to a ripe old age. I'll have to look it up.
Not sure.
But it wasn't
young.
Wasn't young.
I got some information. By 1814, when the British burned the nation's capital and the Library of Congress, Jefferson had acquired the largest personal collection of books in the U.S. He offered to sell his library to Congress as a replacement for the collection destroyed by the British during the War of 1812. And he sold it 6,487 books.
Wow.
He sold to recommence his own Jefferson's concept of Congress accepted Jefferson's offer to sell his comprehensive personal library of 6,487 books, and it became the foundation of the new Library of Congress because the original had been burned by the British in 1814.
We've got about 10 minutes left. Let's see what folks think about it. His morality and his faith. What did you think? He was kind of a reflection of his time, wasn't he, Ron? In that many of them were not today's traditional Christian, what we think of as a Christian, but they were deists. And some of them admired Jesus. Some did believe in the miracles, but many of the founding fathers were deists, believed in God, maybe not Jesus in particular, but there was a wide variety of religious views.
Yeah, it was a time of tremendous change in the world. People were questioning governments, kings, science was starting to come out of its shell. I mean, here in medicine, they were still bleeding people and doing horrible things to try to heal people,
including Washington.
Yeah,
they bled him for a throat infection.
George Washington.
Yep.
You know, I know back in that time, the government, Virginia government in particular, I'm assuming other states, one of the requirements of people that lived there, they had to tithe. It was part of their taxation. So they had to tithe to church. I don't know if they got to choose their church or whatnot, but you know, you say here that Jefferson was trying to fix that so that it was more optional.
right.
Yeah.
In fact, when he founded the University of Virginia late in his life there at Charlottesville, he said that you can build a chapel or whatever on the property, but we're not going to have a formal supported professor of theology and religion as part of the faculty. the students can attend the chapel, but the religious, we're not gonna build a religious Bible study building and have it supported by the university.
You believe
We're gonna keep it separate.
Yeah.
I was curious when you said that I don't know what word you use, vaccination, inoculation, himself and his whole family and slaves. I guess I didn't realize there were those kinds of things available then. Can you?
Pretty
They
gruesome.
use cowpox, right?
Cowpox, yeah.
Pretty gruesome.
They figured out that the milkmaids that had hung around milking cows seemed to have a almost never came down with smallpox. And they figured out, oh, there's something here. And they figured out that they could scratch you with a little bit of the cowpox,
Yep.
and it would give you immunization. So it was one of it may have been maybe even the very first.
John Adams did it for his children.
Okay.
It was criticized.
Wasn't it Madame Curie that invented the microscope, and they couldn't see bacteria,
That is correct.
and so they didn't really know why they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah, it was
Correlational study.
it was Listerine in the 1880s, 1870s that came down real hard and said, we need to scrub, cleanse. There's little things going on that are killing people of infection.
Yeah.
And Listerine swept through French medicine and had his ideas adopted. And they saw the infection rates and the deaths drop dramatically. And there was still stubbornness in the American colonies that were still sticking unclean hands into wounds and all this kind of stuff.
When you say cowpox, what part of a cow? What are you?
I'd have to read for the
That's confusing to me.
cows get
Like a blister.
a disease that's a cousin of smallpox.
I read a book from his daughter, because he had a daughter that, lived, and he was a very bad money manager, and he was bankrupt when he died.
Really?
Yeah.
Sounds like Washington.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was bad, and he had to get money from people when he died, towards the end.
I remember that too, Susie, when I was there, the tour guide said that, and also that after he died, for 50 years, his personal stuff remained in Monticello, and nobody was taking care of the place. So people could have come in and robbed and taken his books and his clothes, but they didn't until a foundation was formed to save Monticello by the residents around there. And they came in and found these artifacts, including the Bible that he made, really? And his own boots and his library that was still there. And they said it was just amazing. It wasn't raided on that mountaintop.
But didn't he sell most of his books to the library?
I think he did before, but there were still books there.
Yeah, he was a bad money manager.
Yeah.
And by then, I think some of the slaves were already gone, or he gave freedom to his kids with Hemi. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. To those kids, he gave freedom to.
Very end. What a complicated life and mind he was.
Yeah. He had a nail manufacturing operation going on there at Monticello. And his nailer, that's the name of the male slave who was putting out 1,000 nails a day or more in this production facility, was freed and went to Richmond and wrote a book. I think it's called 15 Years a Monticello Slave. And he said he was treated well, but still he didn't wish to go back into slavery by any means. But I think we missed the slide that talked about the book of 15 Years a Monticello Slave.
Did you talk about the Louisiana Purchase though?
We must have missed that one too.
I mean, that was a pretty big item.
Jump to the slide 22.
That's when Napoleon was strapped for cash.
Spain passed its Louisiana territory to France.
Yep.
And Jefferson saw that Napoleon needed money.
Yep.
And here was his good chance to think ahead and get the Louisiana territory. And so he negotiated with Napoleon to get the Louisiana territory. Well, Napoleon was tied up fighting a war with England.
And that includes Colorado,
It's part of Colorado. It's that
Half of Colorado.
it's that peacock blue sweep in the center of the US map. So again, he beat back temptation to return to monarchy, struggled to avoid war with France and England, crushed the Barbary pirates, sponsored Lewis and Clark expedition, and won re-election in 1804 overwhelmingly. So,
That was a Southern,
yeah,
he was a
yeah.
South Carolina man.
Ron, was he ever a member of a church that we know, a frequent church goer?
no,
Probably not.
no. But again, he did write several books on religion.
What were the name of them?
You can find them on Amazon, but I think we show a couple of them. Go down to slide 25. Yeah, the life and what's that say? The life, morals of Jesus.
That was the secret Bible.
Well, that's not his book, but that's Irvin's book. That, and again, Irvin's book shows pretty strongly that why we can't take the Bible as every word by anything close to that.
Sure. Well, we're about out of time. Any final thoughts or questions about it? Thank you, Ron, for a great presentation. Next week, our speaker will be an Arapahoe Sheriff's Department deputy. We're talking about policing. So we will have a good discussion. Come back next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ron. Really good. Bye.
Did you read the Wall Street Journal yesterday? There's a new book out on Abraham Lincoln and his faith.
Oh, okay.